Glaciers are considered the cold giants of the mountains, ice masses that extend over large parts of the Earth and also make up the main part of the poles. They have been around for hundreds of years and form the face of various regions such as the Alps. They are beautiful, dangerous, and an important indicator for science. Glaciers are considered key indicators for climate change, making them a global clinical thermometer. It has become clear, especially in the mid-19th century, that changes in climate are shown by them. Humans are partly responsible for these changes and the resulting global glacier melt. Greenhouse gases and emissions of soot and dust particles contribute to the warming of the climate and thus to the melt. Rapidly increasing CO2 concentrations in the atmosphere are overriding the natural cycles of cold and warm periods, preventing glaciers from recovering. The melting of glacial ice is leading to a whole range of serious consequences for us and the environment, many threatening human and animal habitats. The rapid melting of the ice is exposing entire rock flanks and valley areas of debris, allowing rainfall to flow freely in the ice-free debris and rock areas. This creates the threat of landslides and debris avalanches to valleys and settlements during heavy rains. The meltwater collects in huge glacial lakes, causing water floods, flooding in valleys and creating havoc with mud and debris. But it's not only the habitat of many living creatures that is under constant threat from melting. Our drinking water supply is also at risk, as glaciers are important water reservoirs. When the glacier ice has thawed, possible water shortages are the result, as the supply fails to materialize. The water level of rivers fed by glacial water also declines with the melt. Although water shortages in some regions can be made up for in the short term, water levels would decline rapidly until there was nothing left when the peak of the melt was passed. Since only a quarter of the world's freshwater reserves are groundwater, rivers, lakes or water in the atmosphere, the remaining 3/4 consist of snow and ice from the polar regions and glacier regions. Due to the steadily increasing warming of the climate, the permafrost boundary is also shifting. Within the last 50 years, the ground temperature in the permafrost of the Alps has risen by 0.5 degrees, and in the last 100 years it has shifted upward by 100 to 300 meters in altitude. The permafrost soil, which is always frozen, thaw only superficially even in summer, and have the function of holding the rock, debris and soil together with their ice. If this ice is no longer there, mountain slopes lose their load-bearing capacity and start to slide, which means that millions of euros have to be invested in disaster prevention. But the animal and plant world also suffer from the melting of the glaciers. Animals accustomed to the conditions are losing their habitat, and for some plants the rapidly changing environmental conditions are causing stress, making them more susceptible to insects. Glaciers allowed soil to form in the margins of the ice, which in turn allowed plant growth, creating habitat for many small animals. As the ice giants disappear, so do some of the species that have settled there. The United Nations Climate Panel expects global sea levels to rise by up to 1 meter this century, 20 centimeters of which will be caused by glacier melt alone. According to a study, between 443 and 629 billion tons of meltwater are flowing out worldwide. This causes an annual rise in sea level by 1.5 millimeters. According to the study, while an average of 227 billion tons of ice were lost per year between 2000 and 2004, the decline from 2015 to 2019 already averaged 298 billion tons per year. Some of the glaciers particularly affected are in the Alps, Iceland, the Himalayas and Alaska. One example of a severely affected glacier is the Vernachtferner in Tyrol's Ötztal Valley. It has lost 2/3 of its ice mass in the past 150 years. In one hot summer alone, it loses up to 4 meters through meltwater. Since the year 2000, alpine glaciers have been losing 2 to 3% of their volume every year. Glaciologists expect the alpine glaciers to melt almost completely before the end of the century. Meanwhile, 1/3 of the permanent snow and ice masses in the New Zealand Alps have already melted. The existing 5 glaciers in Bavaria have shrunk from 4 to 0.7 square kilometers. For the glaciers to grow again, cool summers with plenty of rainfall are needed above all. The Fenagtferner, for example, would need at least 200 cool, humid summers to fill the valley as it did a good 100 years ago. But it is not only the glaciers in the world's mountains that are affected by melting. The poles are also suffering from rising temperatures. Their ice masses bear witness to the event of glacial melt. Especially in the area of North Pole, the consequences are easy to see. In the last 30 years, the surface of the Arctic glaciers has shrunk dramatically. The average age of the Arctic ice cap is getting lower and lower. Only very few parts of the glaciers are older than 5 years. Most of them are melting in this short time span. Most of the ice at the North Pole forms in winter and melts again in summer. As a result, the area of the pack ice has shrunk by 10% and the thickness by as much as 40% within the last 30 years. As a result, the Gulf Stream is being disrupted, which could lead to a temporary drop in temperatures in Europe, among other things. Because of this, the circulation speed of the current has already decreased by 20% between 1950 and 2000. The cap of the South Pole is also affected. It loses about 5 meters of thickness every year from the base of the ice sheet near the ground. The temperature there rose by an average of 3 degrees between 1974 and 2000. This led to a 3,250 square kilometer slab of ice breaking away from the so-called Larsen Shelf in March 2002. In October 2004, the US space agency NASA said it expected temperatures in some parts of Antarctica to rise by 3.6 degrees Celsius by 2050. And a group of researchers from the British Antarctic Survey concluded that the western part of the South Pole is losing a volume of 250,000 cubic meters of ice a year. This melting could severely affect the marine fauna, which is already evident in the krill swarms. These are said to have already declined by 80% in the past 30 years. On a global scale, the melting of the polar ice caps will probably accelerate global warming because the refraction of solar radiation will decrease. This creates a vicious cycle that must be broken as early as possible to save all living things on this planet.